Cops mock black man on trial, unaware he's the director of the FBI. Before we dive into today's story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. It started with a chuckle, quiet, sharp, and dismissive. "Look at this guy," whispered Officer Jensen, nudging his partner as the tall black man in the tailored charcoal suit entered the courtroom. "Sad bet he's one of those smooth-talking public defenders. Thinks he can outsmart the system." The man didn't flinch, didn't even glance their way. He carried himself with quiet dignity, his back straight, his stride steady. He nodded respectfully to the judge before taking a seat in the gallery, third row from the front. To the officers, he was just another face, another black man walking into a courtroom. They saw his skin before they saw anything else. That was their first mistake. Outside, the media was buzzing about the case. A young black college student, Darius Mitchell, had been arrested 2 months earlier on charges of resisting arrest and assaulting a police officer. The body cam footage had mysteriously gone missing. Witnesses had conflicting stories, and the officers, Jensen and Burke, stood by their version, claiming the kid had been aggressive, threatening, even violent. The courtroom wasn't full, but it held a palpable tension, as if everyone in it knew something was about to unfold, something bigger than one trial. As the prosecution began laying out its case, the two officers sat smugly behind their attorney. Officer Burke kept glancing at the suited black man in the gallery, whispering something to Jensen. Another stifled laugh. "What's he even doing here?" "Probably some family member trying to look important," Burke said with a smirk. They didn't notice the quiet exchange between the judge and the suited man. They didn't catch the respectful nods from court officers as he passed. They didn't see the Ada pause slightly as she registered him in the audience. The man didn't say a word. He simply watched. Darius sat beside his public defender, his hands folded tightly in his lap. He looked exhausted, not just physically, but spiritually, like the fight had been drained from him long before he entered that courtroom. His mother sat behind him, wringing her hands, whispering prayers into her trembling fingers. The defense made its case. Darius had been walking home from a friend's apartment. He had earbuds in. He hadn't heard the officers call out to him. When he turned and saw them approaching quickly, weapons holstered but hands near them, he'd panicked, like any young black man in America might. He raised his hands. He told them he was unarmed, but they tackled him anyway, and shoved me, Officer Burke said on the stand, his voice dripping with performative conviction. When we feared for our safety, there were no bruises on either officer, no medical records, just paperwork, and the kind of story that too many had heard too often. But then, the defense rested, and the judge called a recess before closing arguments. That's when everything shifted. The man in the suit stood up. He stepped forward, past the attorneys, past the stunned defendant, until he was standing right in front of the bench. "It's Your Honor," he said calmly, voice smooth and steady. "If I may address the court briefly." The judge straightened, then offered the slightest smile. "Of course, Director Hayes. You have the floor." A visible ripple passed through the room. "Director? Hayes?" Officer Jensen stiffened. "What the hell?" he whispered. The man turned, slowly, addressing the courtroom. "My name is Malcolm Hayes. I am the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Gasps echoed softly from the gallery. One woman covered her mouth. Darius's mother nearly dropped her purse. Hayes continued, his voice measured but resolute. "And I came here today not as the head of a federal agency, but as a black man in America. I came here because I read this case file, and I saw a familiar story. I saw a young man criminalized for his skin. I saw missing footage. I saw inconsistencies. And most of all, I saw 2 officers who failed to see the human being standing in front of them." He looked directly at Officers Jensen and Burke. "And I've been stopped too. I've been followed in stores. I've had guns drawn on me while jogging in my own neighborhood. The only difference between Darius Mitchell and me is this suit and the title I carry." Silence gripped the room, and I want everyone to think about what that says. If the man you mocked today had been wearing a hoodie instead of a suit, you'd have dismissed him entirely, and that's exactly what you did to Darius. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I will not interfere in the ruling, but I ask the court to consider the pattern, because this isn't about one night. It's about a system that too often mistakes presence for guilt and skin for threat." Then he turned back to Darius, his voice softening. "You're not invisible, son. You matter, and you are not alone." The courtroom was still. No one laughed now. Officer Burke's jaw tightened. Jensen looked down, suddenly fascinated by the courtroom tiles, The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. The verdict, not guilty. Outside, reporters flooded the courthouse. The story had already gone viral, and FBI director shocks courtroom during trial of black teen. The video clips of his speech were being shared faster than news anchors could narrate them. But Director Hayes didn't stay for interviews. He found Darius and his mother standing outside, overwhelmed and uncertain. "Thank you, sir," Darius said quietly, tears brimming in his eyes. "I didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Hayes replied, "because one day it'll be your turn to do it for someone else." That evening, Officer Jensen handed in his badge. He didn't say much, just walked into the precinct, dropped it on the desk, and walked out. Officer Burke was placed on administrative leave pending review, though the mayor's office had already released a statement citing deep concerns about systemic failures. Director Hayes returned to Washington the next morning. He sat at his desk, stared out the window of his office overlooking the Capitol, and thought about the quiet battle he'd fought his whole life, about the countless times he'd bitten his tongue, clenched his jaw, and buried his rage, and about how this time, just this once, he hadn't stayed silent. Respect should never be determined by appearance. Justice should not depend on titles. And the worth of a man must never be judged by the color of his skin. Not everyone in that courtroom walked away changed, but some did. And sometimes that's enough to start something. In a world where judgment often comes before understanding, one man's presence was enough to shake a system. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, remember, the quietest voices sometimes carry the loudest truths.